Today we're going to be talking about Aperture. This is the first of 20 videos that I'm going to do over the next 2 weeks on how to help you improve your videography, your photography, any images that you take with your camera. Most of it will be more useful if you have an SLR or a compact system camera, but to be honest, even if you're just using an iPhone or an Android or a point and shoot, there are a lot of tips here that will help you out. The first one we're talking about is Aperture, like I said, and it's something that will be more effective if you are using a camera where you can control the aperture. So the aperture of the lens is the hole in the middle of the lens that lets the light through. Essentially that's all it is. That's all that the aperture really does, practically speaking. But creatively speaking, because of the diffraction of light as it goes through a hole, it will change the way the lens focuses. When we focus a lens on anything that we can see when we're taking a picture of it, we focus on that one particular point. But if we change the depth of field, if we change the aperture, we can change the amount of the picture in front and behind that's actually in focus. So depth of field means just that. It is how much of the picture is going to be in focus. The lens that I normally use is this one. This is 50mm 1.4. It has an f1.4 aperture, maximum aperture. F-stops are the numbers that we use to be able to describe aperture, and essentially the smaller the number, the more light it will let in. The larger the number, the less light it will let in. Inversely, the smaller the number, the smaller the depth of field, the larger the number, the larger the depth of field. So typically, if we're taking a picture of a person, if we're doing a portrait, if we're doing flower pictures, anything like that, we want to isolate the subject against the background. So we want the background to be out of focus. So we use a very small depth of field to be able to really isolate that subject, throw the background beautiful out of focus to isolate that subject against it. We get these really nice soft backgrounds. Sometimes if you've got nice highlights in the background, you'll get the bokeh, which just look really soft in the background. If you use a very high depth of field, so using a high aperture, so say f16, f11, f22, whatever you want to use, then you'll get everything in focus. Not quite everything. Technically you're never quite getting everything in focus, but you'll get a lot more in focus. So if we're taking a landscape where we want to get a huge amount in focus, that's when we want to use a very large aperture. High aperture, small. There is a real confusion about people talking about high apertures, low apertures, what it means when we're talking about that. When I talk about a high aperture number, a high f-stop, we're talking about f22, f16, so that is a large depth of field, but it's actually a very small hole. If we talk about a low aperture, so 1.4, that's a very large hole, it's a very shallow depth of field. And I know that when I first started taking pictures, that was something that the f-stop numbers confused me initially, but essentially the lower the number, the more light it lets in and the shallower the depth of field. The higher the number, the bigger the depth of field and the less light it lets in. So like I say, if you're taking a portrait, you want to really separate it from the background. If you're doing a landscape, you want to be able to get as much in as possible. So landscapes are typically taken at say f16, portraits are taken as low as possible. The lens I was talking about, the f1.4, that's a really nice wide aperture. You can get an f1.2 for Canon cameras, and Nikon's just actually announced they're going to do an f0.95, which will be really wide open, get an incredibly shallow depth of field. The problem with those shallow depth of fields is sometimes the focus is so precise that if you are off by just a tiny bit, the picture can end up looking like you haven't focused on the right spot at all. So sometimes it's worth going to a slightly higher aperture, so maybe 2.8, just to really make sure you can get that detail in. So essentially that's how aperture works. Remember, this is just a series of guidelines, they're not a series of rules. You can choose to use a higher aperture if you're taking a portrait, you can choose to use a lower aperture if you're taking a landscape. Sometimes if you're taking a landscape that's got some foreground, maybe some bushes around the edge of where you want to take the shot and you want to blur them out, using a low aperture, so using a f1.4, will actually give you a really nice effect because you've got this soft edging to the picture. But try it, see how you get on with it. Like I said, this is the first of 20 videos, so please subscribe to the channel. You'll be kept up to date with everything that's going on. So I'm going to release 2 a day for the next 2 weeks. and I hope that you find them useful. If there's anything that you want to know, if there's anything I don't cover, please put it into the comments and I'll do my best to make sure I can help you out.